So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name is Jake, and I'm the VP External for the SFU JDC West 2021 team. Today, I'm joined by our co-captains, Molly and Andrew, our VP Logistics, Penny, as well as our VP Events, Akam. And joining us today are some very special guests from our generous corporate sponsor, Belmar Consulting Group. Here we have Matt, who is the Business Strategy and Innovation Director at Belmar, and he's brought some other very important members to join us for the interview today. Now to get started, we'd really love to hear a little bit of an introduction from each of you. Could you please kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, your role at Belmar, and a little bit about the career path you've taken up until this point?
Yeah, for sure. So thanks everybody for tuning in. My name is Matthew, like Jake was saying, Director of Business Strategy. Really what my role at Belmar is focusing on management of strategic alliances and relationships with post-secondary institutions, with nonprofits, with Salesforce, so our partner, as well as that, it's overall marketing strategy and culture engagement from the team, and just process improvement as a whole. So in a small business, you kind of wear a lot of different hats. So I like to consider myself, how many different hats can I possibly wear at any given point in time? But how I got here, essentially, I graduated from BCIT from the Computer Information Technology program with a technology management degree. So a little bit different, but pretty technical. Kind of fumbled my way through doing some tech support gigs until I ultimately came upon consulting, and primarily Salesforce consulting, which is what ultimately landed me here. But that's myself in 10 seconds or less, which I'll let Ro and Cole introduce themselves as well.
Sure, thanks, Matt. Hey, everyone. My name is Rowan Alfonso. I'm the Director of Operations at Belmar Consulting. So Director of Operations, yeah, that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different organizations. Further, as well, what Matt had said, I do wear a lot of different hats. One of the things I'll do is, I'm in charge of sort of the resourcing for the project teams. So we have a delivery wing of the organization, which has project managers, Salesforce consultants, Salesforce developers. So we deploy a combination of any of those skills to multiple projects for Salesforce implementations. So I kind of oversee those projects. The other hat, if you will, is around recruiting and resourcing. So growing the organization, working with the business development team as we sort of manage the pipeline of opportunities coming in, as well as forecasting how we're going to deliver those projects. So that's probably the other biggest part of my role here. I've been with the organization for almost 3 years now. Previous to this role, I was also a Salesforce consultant at Belmar. And previous to that, I was a consultant at a different partner as well. And previous to that, I was actually a software developer, and that's really what I had studied at BCIT through the Computer Systems Technology program. Did development for a couple of years, learned the hard way that it was not my forte. So I ended up switching to the consulting side, where it was really nice to be able to blend more sort of having personal interactions and building relationships with clients, as well as still being able to leverage that technical background. So that's a bit about myself, and I'll pass it over to Cole as well.
Everyone, nice to see everyone. My name's Cole, and I'm one of the consultants here at Belmar. How I got here, long story short, graduated from UBC, similar to Matt, with a business technology management degree. Took me about 3.5 years to figure out at UBC what I ultimately wanted to go into. I didn't like accounting, I didn't like marketing, I didn't like finance, I didn't like T-Log, I pretty much didn't like anything. And I was like, I eventually want to end up in the tech sector. And so I was like, the closest thing that I can get into is business technology management. So that's what I specialized in at UBC. And basically that role or that specialization led me to land an internship at a consulting firm here in Vancouver. I kind of fluked out the application process. The timing really worked out, got an internship, and then that led into a full-time role where I worked for about 2 years as a consultant in the Salesforce space. That was my first gig. Belmar really is my second, I would say, big boy job outside of school. And I've been at Belmar for the past a little bit less than 2 years now. I'm one of the primary Salesforce consultants. And what that really means is I'm the person that goes in and learns how a business works, figures out what the pain points are, and ultimately designs a solution to help alleviate some of those pain points.
Perfect. That was great. Thank you guys for those introductions. So I guess now we can dive into some of the questions that we received after polling our following on our Instagram accounts. So the first question that we had was, what made you decide to go into a consulting career?
Cool. Why don't you give this one a start here?
Perfect. I was, it's actually kind of funny. I had a meeting with Penny directly before this call. And so we talked a little bit about this, and my answer was because I get to wear this. I don't have to wear a suit to work. And obviously that's not the full reason, but it's definitely a perk. But yeah, why did I choose a consulting career? I think consulting is, I kind of compare it kind of like going to law school. And this is kind of the analogy I always get from my mom who went to law school. At the end of the day, a consultant is just someone who is good at solving problems. And I think that translates to any area of your life. It's not, it's something that can be applied to anything, whether that's learning how to start a business or learning how to solve problems in a different industry. You just learn how to think and ultimately how to become a good problem solver. And so that's, I think, what was the attractive factor about consulting. And I say consulting generally. I think that there's different types of consulting. Obviously in Salesforce, we're in the Salesforce consulting / IT consulting world. But still, at the end of the day, you are solving problems. And the more that you can practice that in whatever industry, the more that can translate over to whatever other endeavors you're doing.
Yeah, and I guess really for me, why I got into consulting. So similar to Cole, yet I kind of stumbled upon consulting. I actually didn't even know that I was applying for a consulting job when I first applied for a consulting role. I think the title was like some solutions consultant or something like that. So I had no idea, and I ended up in consulting. But either way, I think it's really been a fit because I was never the most technical person, and I wanted to be able to bridge between business and tech. And that was kind of my forte, even coming from a technical university program. So it's kind of been a fit, and that's kind of why I decided to stay in consulting, is being that bridge and noticing that there's a whole area for growth and opportunity in which people can't speak each other's languages. Business and tech are often disparate. So being able to join the two is one of the reasons why I'm in consulting.
Yeah, and just to also, I guess, add to that as well. Myself, when I was, a lot younger, customer service jobs was one thing that I had done, and there were some aspects of that were enjoyable, other parts that weren't as enjoyable. And then when I got into software development, doing the one thing that I did really enjoy there was sort of the business requirements and gathering when you started doing that part of it. And then looking for the next role. I realized, consulting is really just a bit of a lot of different skill sets. Really, it's not one. You're not focused on one particular thing. So there's a lot of requirements gathering, a lot of critical thinking, solutioning, making recommendations, and really just managing relationships is probably a really big piece. So, but also having a bit of a technical background definitely helps. And I think also being able to translate business speak into technical speak when needed to the right audience. So it was really just the variety and all the different things that you can do is probably the biggest thing that I enjoyed about it.
That's awesome to hear. Kind of on the same line of thinking, what do you find to be the most fulfilling aspect of the work that you do now as a consultant?
I'll go. I would say that there's a couple different ways I can answer that. There's personal fulfillment, and then there is seeing a really happy stakeholder, I think is a very good feeling when projects go well and when things go according to plan and you see the changes that you've implemented kind of come to fruition and how the end user is affected. I think that is one of the most fulfilling aspects because we do a lot of public sector work and nonprofit work, and the systems and processes in place usually aren't what you would call best practices. Things can be dated. They might have very archaic ways of doing things. And when you can come in and solve a lot of those pain points, it's a really rewarding feeling. In the other realm, in personal fulfillment, I would say it's just you're always every project that you're on is going to have its own unique set of challenges and problems that need to be solved. And that just means that you are growing. And so you're never sitting stagnant in a consulting gig that I have ever seen anyways, because each problem that comes down the pipe has its own unique set of problems and challenges. And anytime you're growing or learning, then that's never a bad thing.
Yeah, and just to build off that, I mean, one of the biggest things for myself that I find fulfillment is really just the clients and the customers. You're literally making people's lives easier. And I guess to draw on a story, I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but there was a training session that I ran once, and the users or the people that I was training, they had so much pain in their current process, and the way they were doing things was so slow that at the end of the training, they ended up clapping and cheering. And I've never had that before, kind of weird, but either way, and I think Cole is actually on it, but either way, that's the kind of thing you're doing. And that's very fulfilling work. You're making their lives easier, because oftentimes they're on really, really bad systems. So that's kind of enjoyable.
Yeah, one thing I'll also mention with specifically with Matt and Cole, that that same client, they came back, and the feedback that we get for doing such a good job on those kinds of projects is really rewarding to hear. They say things like, "You guys know our business better than we do," right? So when you hear a client say something like that about an organization that you've only been involved with for maybe 6 months or so, that's really rewarding to hear. Personally, myself, when I was also doing consulting, I would say it also comes down to just getting a lot of wins. So whether it's, there's some kind of problem you're trying to solve, whether it's a technical problem, whether it's a resourcing problem, whether it's a scheduling problem or something like that, coming out of whatever challenge that you're trying to solve and being able to address that, that's always very, very, very satisfying. The other piece was, the solutions that you're building, they're not just solutions, to build software, but at the end of the day, specifically for the nonprofit, you're playing a part in helping them do their jobs better, so that they can focus on the things that are more important to them than, how do I do something in software. So being able to really just make their lives easier, so that they can deliver their services better, that's probably the most fulfilling part that I recall.
Perfect. So kind of looking maybe at the flip side of those answers, what do you guys find is the most challenging aspect of consulting?
I can take a pass at this one. You guys can chime in. So we shared what the most fulfilling part was: customers. Sometimes the most challenging part is also the customers. But for me, it's the fact that there's so many good things that you can be doing across so many different clients, but there's only one of you. You only have so much time in the day, and it's so easy to say yes to way too many things and end up I'm sure you've heard it before, over-promising, under-delivering. So being able to have that conversation, that open and honest conversation, that fact of the matter is that we can't do this in this timeline or whatnot, that's always going to be more beneficial long term. But that is challenging, is sometimes not being able to please every single client. And you're coming in because you are the expert, you're the trusted advisor. And sometimes your expertise is often hard, honest truth for them. So that can be challenging sometimes.
Yeah, and I think even just managing expectations of different types of people that you're working with. So not even so much on your own project team, but the client. Sometimes if you're working with another partner, if you're working with the client's their project manager, their technical team. Sometimes being able to have to change the way that you communicate your ideas depending on your audience, that can sometimes be challenging as well.
Yeah, and my 2 cents are, and this is something that Ro definitely has to deal with a lot more than I do day to day, but especially in a smaller scale organization, each project that comes down the pipe, the company's affected on average greater than a larger organization. And so at a consulting firm, you're not ever just working on one project. Typically you're working across multiple projects that are at different stages. And so that means everything is cyclical. A project follows a cycle, and things happen all right now, and then there'll be a little bit of a delay. And ultimately, you try to set the flattest curve across all of your projects, because that helps you forecast your allocations and how much you're expected to work. It also means that you are not going to be working 80 hours this week and 10 the next week. You're trying to flatten out that curve because there's so many different projects with so many different stages in the project lifecycle. I would say that that's one of the most difficult things to manage. I would say from like a consulting firm's perspective, is trying to find the right balance in under allocating and over allocating on a project across all the projects that are in the pipeline.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Shifting away from more of what is consulting to a little more of what does Belmar do? From what I understand, you guys focus a lot more on nonprofit organizations. Why does Belmar focus on not-for-profit organizations?
Yeah, it's a good question, Andrew. So, I mean, historically, Belmar's focus on the public sector. And public sector, for those who aren't aware, very, very long RFP cycles, long sales cycles, often can be quite political, but there's also often a lot of governance, specifically around data. So kind of why we focus on nonprofit is because we have a lot of experience with public sector and that expertise with data governance. Data is very, very important. And especially when you've got a lot of constituent data or donor data, data is very, very important. And being able to securely handle that and have the right process for it, we bring a different level of expertise around that, and it kind of blended well into nonprofits. And beyond that, some of the missions that from these nonprofits are perfectly aligned with our mission and core values, which is doing right by our customers, community, partners, and team. I think those are our 4 core values, but it essentially aligns very well to some of the projects that we're doing as well.
And the one thing as well that we found with nonprofits specifically is that a lot of times they're not very technically inclined as well, and with that, their systems are not necessarily well configured to support their processes, and sometimes they're not even very process oriented. And you know, the more process that you can have and standardize and implement, generally speaking, sometimes the more the smoother things can happen. And the less risk they're exposed to. So the one thing we did find is that with the nonprofit space, that there's a lot of opportunity to not only improve their systems, but also to help them define their processes as well. And that's one of the reasons that we focus on it. And it's also one of the most rewarding things about working with nonprofits as well.
Yeah, and I guess the last note, just building on his last point there, you know, if there wasn't an opportunity in the nonprofit space, then I don't think that we'd be focusing on it. So I agree, it is, I would say on average, more rewarding to work in the nonprofit space. But that being said, there's just a ton of opportunity for IT related work, because as Ro mentioned, there is a lack of processes and governance and systems in place, which presents the opportunity for people who are experts to come in and help them solve those problems.
Along those same lines, are you able to share any specific examples of how you've implemented software to help nonprofits fundraise?
Yeah, maybe I'll take a stab at this one. So there's definitely more than one. And ultimately, whenever you're helping an organization become more efficient, ultimately that means it's more dollars in the nonprofit's pockets to do whatever they want to allocate those funds towards. So there are certain ways that we can implement software to help them raise more money, but there's also ways that we can implement software to make them more efficient in other areas, which means it's more donations. One example that I can give in helping a nonprofit, giving them the ability to raise more money, we'll say, is a lot of times nonprofits, when they come in, they don't have super defined processes, and they are doing things a lot of the times manually. And one of the things that they'll come in, and I've seen this a few different times, is they'll have someone who's in charge of soliciting donations. Let's call them a donation solicitor manager or what have you. And they might be using a report that shows them that all of their donors from last year that haven't donated this year. So that's a super valuable piece of information, because people who donated last year, you can assume might be more likely to donate this year. Going through that list could be 2 people, that list could be 500 people. And if it's 500 people, you can imagine that if it's one person's job to go through that list and follow up with them, with every single person, then that's a lot of manual work. And similar to what Belmar is, we're a small organization, we all kind of wear multiple hats sometimes. Most people in the nonprofit space wear multiple hats because they don't have the luxury of having big salaries or big budgets to hire team members to do everything. So all of these people are doing everything themselves. So the more you can automate and the more you can simplify their lives, that's always going to be a win. So the one example I'll give is that giving a nonprofit an automated way to track and manage donation campaigns, rather. So in this one example, it's basically building out a system whereby you can enroll all of your past donors into a campaign, which basically helps you identify based on actions that they might take, whether that's clicking a link in the email, or whether they've actually made a donation, or whether they haven't viewed the email. But automating that process in such a way that the system knows all this information, and you can guide them down customized paths that you predefine, which ultimately takes out all of the manual work of having to manually email them, follow up with them if they didn't respond, or send them follow-up emails if they did respond. You can automate that entire process, which is essentially giving them back, I want to say, hundreds of hours over the span of some months. So that's just one way, and that was a bit of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that answered the question.
Another way that's that some Salesforce specifically has helped really with help nonprofits fundraise is as Cole mentioned, better the ability to better manage their communications for events, so that the more targeted touch points that you can have with the right kinds of people. The other piece is around volunteers. So with Salesforce and with the tools, you can manage the people that you need and the resources and the skills that you need to help support these events. So that usually helps with, the better an event, the better the event that how it's run. Generally speaking, that can free up their resources to spend more time on true fundraising activities.
Yeah, I mean, essentially it's going to be, how can we reduce the amount of admin time so we can spend that time towards building relationships, having open, honest conversations with potential donors and whatnot. So it's around automating perhaps redundant and repetitive tasks that perhaps even sending out on big scales can take just a lot of time. So that's my 2 cents.
That's great to hear. In terms of projects that you guys have worked on, what would you say was one of the most interesting projects that you've had the opportunity to kind of work on? Cole,
did you want to, you've worked on a lot of projects. Did you want to share yours?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about the one that we're currently on. Penny. No, I'm totally kidding. I'm gonna talk about a different one. This is one that's before your time, Penny. So Matt and I, we worked on a project, it seems like a lifetime ago, but it wasn't that long ago, for BC Center for Ability. And so what this organization does is they help families with children that have complex needs. So they provide resources to help kids, resources to help parents rather manage these children with complex needs. And so the core base of their workforce are what they call their own consultants. And these consultants are experts at dealing with children with complex needs. They're not experts at IT. They're not experts at using technical software, all that stuff. They're experts at managing students or children with complex needs. When we got in there, they had quite an archaic system that took a lot of manual effort to accomplish some simple tasks. And so what we were able to go in there and do is really implement quite a transformational technology that kind of bridged the gap between the end parents and the actual consultants that were working day to day. So that way parents at all times could have an up-to-date log and log into a portal to see that here is the status of my child and the progress that is being made, all with notes and capturing reporting and all this sort of thing. And really that was extremely rewarding because you're having a direct impact on the family who is receiving those services, their end experience, as well as providing the consultants who are providing all of this work for these children. You're implementing a system that is allowing them to do their job better and make their lives easier. So that way, as Matt mentioned previously, it's eliminating any redundancies where you can, so that way they can focus on what they're good at. They're not good at figuring out how to use technology. They're good at building relationships with children and trying to solve their problems. And so ultimately that was super rewarding because we got to deal with all of these people who were ultimately helping kids and families with very complex needs.
I guess for myself, it's not a nonprofit project per se, but probably the most interesting use case I've heard of back in the public sector days was just the BC Civil Forfeiture Office, which essentially seizes goods, like could be drugs, could be money, could be cars, could be houses, seizes stuff that's subject to from criminal activity. So it's very interesting, very, very interesting data set. But it's also cool to just understand that there's people that are managing all of this, putting up these items for auctioning and whatnot. So that was probably the most I can speak to it, but it's very interesting use case.
And myself, there was a smaller one that I'd worked on years ago. This organization on the island called Hero Work. And essentially what they did was volunteer renovations. So they would, if you take something like, a soup kitchen or something like that, they would go in and maybe over the span of 3 weeks, to a month, do a big renovation and then sort of a big reveal. So they're a nonprofit that would basically do renovations for other nonprofits. And that's really what their model was. The way that Salesforce was supporting was really around getting all of the volunteers and managing the volunteers and the skills and the shifts and the hours that were needed in order to do these actual renovations. So this was a pretty cool project to support them and just see all of the different volunteers and the hours and the skills that were needed to support these kinds of activities.
Perfect. So just kind of hearing a little bit about these interesting project experiences, I'm sure a lot of our viewers who are university students are kind of wondering what they can do to sort of reach that consulting level where they're involved in these sort of projects. So what kind of personal attributes do you guys think allow someone to succeed and thrive in a consulting role? And how can a university student kind of gain relevant experience and start sort of developing these attributes right at their position that they're in now?
Yeah, there's a handful of different skills, and I mean, it's going to vary depending on the type of consulting that you want to do as well. I would say one of the big things that we look for is communication, critical thinking as well. And what I like to say is that anybody can, let's say you're to build something, anybody can build it, anybody can read something and figure out how to build it, but not everybody can push back on that and understand the business reason behind something, the why behind you're building something. And if there's an issue with that, push back, critically think about it, but provide solutions, provide alternatives. Not everybody can do that. And that critical thinking, that shift of mindset is very, very valuable skill set in addition to effective communication. How do I tangibly get experience doing this? Well, I mean, internships, great opportunity, co-ops, great opportunity. But even beyond that, it's as simple as getting experience presenting. And I'm not just talking purely waiting for an assignment in class, waiting for a competition to present, present to your brother, present to your sister, just get experience, exposure, talking through things to be able to understand where you can perhaps spend more time, and the ability to explain something that might be confusing or complex to somebody who has absolutely no idea what that topic is. That's an underrated skill set and a good practical way that anybody can gain experience.
Yeah, I think just to add to what Matt's saying, critical thinking, I think is a really huge piece. And a lot of that comes from listening really well. So a lot of times you're on the receiving end of what are the problems that they're trying to communicate. So understand, diving in and peeling back the different layers to those things to really try to uncover what's the root cause of the issue and what's really the issue that they're trying to communicate. That's one piece of it. Another piece is time management. I think that's, as Cole had mentioned previously, your chances are you're going to be on multiple projects as a consultant. So being able to manage your own time, your tasks effectively, that's really important. And with that also just comes, being really organized as well. And I'm sure that this is obviously really important. It's this life skill, and especially university as well. But those are things that all definitely directly can translate to any kind of consulting role, no matter which industry you're in.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add on top of what those two guys already mentioned, but I would say that, yeah, communication is huge, as I think Matt was mentioning. And I think if you're trying to get, if you're totally fresh and you're trying to get some experience and you don't have any experience, it's just trying to find problems and solve the problems. That doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be IT related. It can just be process related. At the end of the day, you build software around processes. You don't do it the other way around. So you want to first define a process and then build software around that. So if you figure out and you find a process and you define that process, you want to find the problems in that process first before you start implementing technology, because ultimately you want to implement the technology around a new process that hopefully was changed for the better. So you don't necessarily need to start off doing IT related consulting. You can find any organization, nonprofit or for-profit, and you could even offer them pro bono consulting and say, hey, I'm a university student. This is my background. I would love to get experience helping your organization, and I might be able to offer services for free. I would come to learn, or would love to learn just what kind of systems and processes you have. Are there any specific pain points? And then if they give you some pain points, maybe you can figure out solutions to help those businesses at kind of a pro bono. That's just one example. I've seen people do that in the past. Obviously, it's a little bit easier said than done to do that, but I would say that if you are able to offer some sort of pro bono, it's that would be one way to really demonstrate to a future employer, and as well to get really relevant experience about what consulting really is about.
Awesome. One of the big questions that we got was about the Salesforce certifications and applying to, I guess, Belmar or any kind of company in the Salesforce space. Would you say it's an advantage to have a Salesforce certification before applying, or can anyone apply and learn along the way while they're on the job?
Yeah, I can speak to this one really quick. It never hurts to have a certification versus not having a certification. Definitely, depending on the role that and the experience level that a firm might be hiring for, they're going to be looking for different levels of talent at different points in time, or not talent, but necessarily but skills and experience. So, if someone has more skills and experience, they may be more preferred, but at the same time, that doesn't guarantee a seat at the table, if you will, right? On the flip side, there have been applicants that have certifications, but I think those other skills that we had mentioned, if those are lacking, I think those are probably more crucial, really, because certifications can be gained at any time. They definitely are not they're not one of the main things that we look for when we're hiring. Definitely those other skills that we spoke of, I think, are more preferred, and they're harder to teach as well, right? So if those things are demonstrated, those are probably more important for sure.
Yeah, and when we hire somebody with little to no Salesforce experience, what we're looking for is not necessarily that they're an expert on the platform, but how quickly can they learn? What's their critical thinking skill set? And I mean, maybe that admin certification is an objective in their probation or whatnot, but either way, it's valuable having an admin cert if you can, because it's a baseline of knowledge. It's an assumption that you know X amount on the platform already. But again, not a requirement, just a preference.
Okay,
I
nice
got no
to hear.
input.
Oh. Cole, do you have anything to add?
I was just to say I got no input.
Okay. So switching gears just a little bit, what would you guys say is what is your favorite part about working at Belmar? Touching a little bit on like the culture side of things.
I gotta go? Sure.
Yeah.
It's the team, I think. like I mentioned previously, I got to show up and work in a hoodie. It's a Belmar hoodie, I might say. It's a Belmar hoodie. And that's not obviously the reason, but it's just, it's the team and the people that you're working with day to day. When I go into work, I don't feel, well, it's virtual, as we're all aware, I'm sure. It's like feeling there's a group of camaraderie, and it's together collectively solving problems. It's not cutthroat or competitive. It's very collaborative. And I would say that there is a very, very good team atmosphere here at Belmar. And that's one of the things that I personally enjoy the most about working at Belmar.
Yeah, for me, it's got to be Cole. Cole's in all seriousness, it is very fulfilling working with. I mean, you're going to encounter problems across projects, and it's very fulfilling going through projects and you're essentially in the trenches trying to figure those things out together. We're huge subscribers of just not siloing information and knowledge. So it doesn't matter if you're the smartest person in the room. If it's like pulling teeth trying to get answers from that person or get help from that person, what value is that? So we have a very open culture, and that people are willing to take the time to carve out of their day to spend time and teach people, not just give them answers. But yeah, that's part of the culture at Belmar.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, it's also just trying to be supportive and have an environment of support for everyone, and it's at different levels of the organization, right? So our CEO has a very open door policy. I think Cole and Matt can definitely also attest to just the openness and availability of everyone at every level to have conversations for no matter what the topic. The other thing is around just willingness to improve and openness to improve on processes. So as part of a small organization versus a large organization, a lot of times you don't have these things fully fleshed out. So just having the right people involved and willing to always be, how can we improve things and make things better where it needs to be, and being able to make those decisions quickly. So those are the things that I like about Belmar specifically. And Cole.
Yeah, no, that's all really great to hear. And that about wraps up all the questions that we had for today. We really appreciate your time and the insightful responses that you've provided us with. And if students have any further kind of questions or want to learn more about Belmar, where's the best place for them to look further into?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for kind of background information, website, belmar.ca, great place to start. If you have specific questions, feel free to connect with either three of us or Trevor on LinkedIn. Let's just ask questions there.
Perfect. All right, then I guess we can end it off there. Thank you guys so much.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to meet you guys.
Take care.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you.
Great to meet you all.